Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through 3 of the top stories, including one talking about how regulation isn't actually what's hurting people, but it's the red tape around it. Interesting perspective, we'll dive into it. An article asking whether Donald Trump will actually leave after 2028, which I think is in a lot of people's minds. I think it's also a terrible assumption to make that he would stay. And our final article talking about green energy in China and how they're actually trying to cut back on their emissions and if it's actually working or not. And of course, we will end the day with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. But that's enough rambling for me. Let's jump into our daily debate. So, how much regulation is too much regulation? That's a big theoretical. But I want you to bring out specific examples from your life. When has there been a piece of regulation that just goes a little bit too far? When is there if you're a business owner, you've dealt with them more than you would like. If you're an average citizen, maybe it's the way that you have to interact with different people from around the sector in your neighborhood. Maybe there are certain rules that your local government has put in place that actually infringe upon how you live your life. Regulation very often does this, and obviously the justification is it is good for us most of the time. It is helping the health of the group or the society, but what regulation has gotten in your way? And it could even be from a housing authority, because technically that is a governing body. What type of regulation has most frustrated you? That's probably the best way to put it. Throw it down there in the comment section, because this first one, if you've dealt with regulation before, it may frustrate you just a little bit, but it comes from New Republic. Headline reads, "Regulations aren't killing the working class, but the red tape is." Now, for those of you who are wondering, whoa, what's the difference between the regulation itself and the red tape? Because very often they are associated. Not always. There are some regulations that are pretty easy. They say you can't do this, and there's not technically red tape that comes along with it, where you have to fill out a whole bunch of forms. You have to apply for this visa. You have to apply for this exception. Some regulations can just be, hey, don't do this. Period. Full stop. There is no exception process. There is no license that you have to get in order to get it. It's just, this is what it is. You're not allowed to do it. But very often in the world we live in that is more realistic and less idealistic than the one I just mentioned, where they just say, oh, stop. And even then, you don't like your freedoms being infringed. But the point they're getting at here is that they're not necessarily connected, and it's the red tape that is slowly wrapping itself around the neck of the working class and strangling them. Every single breath that they take is being basically restricted by these different types of rules that are put in place, these different processes that are slowly chipping away at the valuable time of the working class, which honestly, that argument itself, the argument that red tape is bad because it chips away at valuable time. It takes time for working class citizens to fill out these certain forms. It takes extra energy away from them to not be able to spend with their kids, to not be able to spend on their work endeavors, or to even divert time from their work endeavors. That argument very well resonates with me. Time is money. And I'm not trying to make it base, and I'm not trying to make everything materialistic and have it equate time to money solely. But time affects how much money you're able to make. Time is also valuable in and of itself in a way that we can note value is money nowadays. So if you want to go that way and not necessarily say that it's a straight materialist point of view, great, you can go for that. But they're not wrong, which is every single time any business owner, any random citizen wants to apply for a program, whether it be Medicare, Medicaid, whether it be the Social Security process. I mean, I remember I didn't have a Social Security card there for a while. I had to reapply. The red tape in order to get an identification card that is practically necessary in many of the adult functions of the American society is absolutely hilarious. The fact that they would not be able to provide me with my identity card unless I went through hours upon hours of red tape, phone interviews, and most of it was online, don't get me wrong, but I had to call a few times in order to get things sorted out. It is absolutely hilarious to me. There are certain things that you can't apply for without a Social Security card. I believe there are certain types of loans. There are definitely certain types of grants from the government that you can't apply for without the Social Security card. So imagine going to the government saying, hey, I want to try to get this grant, and then they say, oh, well, you don't have a Social Security card, so you have to go through this extra hoop over here in order to even be able to qualify to apply for said grant. That is a lot of red tape that is not necessary. So let's go into the middle of the article, and by the middle, I mean the second paragraph here, and let's actually delve into an example they provide. Quote, one example cited by Jenselin involved Representative Marjorie Glensup Glensencap Perez, who recently made a video explaining her opposition to regulations that seemingly prevent daycare workers from peeling fruit for children because it counts as, quote, food preparation and therefore would require a establishment to have more sinks. She presented this regulation as part of a pattern that she's seen before in Washington, D.C., part of an integrated disregard for working people and policymakers in D.C., end quote. Now, let's be clear. This actually regulation was more on the state level, and that's what the article goes on to say. They say, hey, they're actually attacking this regulation for no good reason because it's not necessarily on the federal level. Maybe they can adjust it on the state level. Fair enough. But I think the overall argument is more important, which regulation in general is actually not going to benefit the people that it intends to benefit. It's going to harm them more often than not. Now, could there be some great rationale here, which is normal daycare workers, if they don't clean their hands properly, then they could be peeling food with debris, bacteria, germs from all the other children that they've been operating with, and maybe it only takes one sick child to work with one woman and then she goes and prepares food, or one man and then he goes and peels a banana for the other kids and then they're sick. I can understand where you're coming from there, but also, why don't you just promote healthy and more rigorous cleaning standards? And by that, I don't mean you do it on a regulation basis. You just say, okay, hey, you want to work here? We want to make sure our children don't get sick. If you want to work here, you got to spend at least 1 minute between classrooms, between different activities, washing your hands. Not only are you doing it for yourself to keep yourself clean, not only are you doing it to protect the children, but you're also teaching the children a good standard of living. And you're teaching them that cleaning, washing their hands and being clean and trying to make sure they go into different situations prepared and not necessarily dragging along stuff from the last operation. That's a good thing. There are lots of ways that you could frame this. It doesn't necessarily have to be regulation or red tape. But let's get specifically into what do they mean about red tape. Quote, of course, the major anger people feel at institutions is real. People do feel like government is not working for them, but this anger cannot be allowed to cannibalize the interests of the working class. Any politician truly interested in the welfare of this group would divert this ire towards the parts of the government that truly impede people's ability to live a good life. It's time to take aim at the mountains of requirements and bureaucratic hurdles people must overcome in order to access government services and benefits. Okay, there you go. So let's come into a world where I truly accept that regulation is okay. On a base level, I'm assuming that I have no objections to regulations. Now let's really address the red tape part. Let's say I really want to give out a program. I want to give out welfare checks or something to that effect. How do you do it without red tape? How do you do it without having some sort of form that says, hey, this is my income, and if I meet these criteria, I have below this amount of income, I've only been working 2 jobs, whatever it may be, and you have to do it first come, first serve. So if you're applying for welfare, normally in order to get those checks, you're going to have to pull out basically certain forms. You're going to not necessarily be means tested, so to speak, because that is a separate process in and of itself, but they're still going to have to verify that you're not a $100,000 salary kind of guy and say, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we can give you a welfare check. No, they have to at least check your salary. So that's going to be a form right there. Of course, it's going to be red tape, but that's a very little amount of red tape. The best way to get rid of all red tape would literally be say, okay, hey, if you're below a certain income, then you can apply for this welfare program. We will open it at 11 a.m. We will make sure that our servers are primed and ready. It will go out to 10,000 people in this certain municipality, and you can go on there first come, first serve. If anybody goes above that cap, then we will prosecute you. So say you're someone who goes for a welfare check and you already have $100,000 in assets, or you have $100,000 that you're making a year, then we will prosecute you. That gets rid of a lot of red tape on the front end. It adds a lot on the back end, but I can see how that would work. But then how would you not have systems of people who just come in? And I'm trying to make an argument for red tape here. I'm trying to analyze why it would be something that's necessary. Because then you're going to have a system of people who take advantage of this. They're going to deploy bots in order to get as much of that welfare as they can. They're going to have bots that can click through everything very, very quickly, put in their bank information or their at least fake home addresses, P.O. boxes very quickly. And then you're going to be depriving people of access to these sort of funds because there are going to be people taking advantage. And they're going to probably use the loophole that I just spoke about, which is, they'll be prosecuted prosecuted afterwards, they don't have to worry about where those funds go necessarily if they're prosecuted afterwards. If they do it from an alternate nation, they set up a a place in Guam. They send them to a random PO box that gets sent out before everything's prosecuted or everything comes to light legally. So the question would be, okay, yes, then we have to have some sort of means testing or at least some front end checking. Well, guess what? That adds bureaucracy. That adds layers upon layers of people who have to check the information, who have to process everything on top of actually checking to make sure it's accurate, but to process it, get it sent out to everybody. So those are layers upon layers of bureaucrats. Now, of course, there will continue to be more and more things that are added. Well, maybe the standard of living changes, so we actually have to change the amount. Maybe we have a whole bunch of people who are applying in the lower range. We can send them money immediately, but then we have to actually consider multiple factors, whether you have kids or not. When you get to somebody, both people, two people applying, who have $40,000 worth of income, and one is supporting two kids, one is supporting one kid, but one has person with the two kids has a house, the other person is only renting. Like, these sort of considerations start to come in. You have to be able to parse things. You have to add new rules in order to actually best accommodate them. You have to create new programs sometimes in order to make sure that you're addressing a particular subset of the population, which adds more red tape. And then the bureaucrats, as they continue to grow, because they're properly doing their job, don't get them wrong, they're trying to means test everything. They're trying to make sure that nobody's getting through who should be getting through, but they're also making sure the people that apply do get what they need. Well, they're not going to want to lose their job, so they're going to continue to create reasons to insulate their job and continue to exist. So my point being that regulation in and of itself doesn't necessarily have to mean red tape, as I provided examples before, but very often it is going to. Very often for these different programs, that, let's be clear, welfare is a little bit different than just straight regulation, no doubt about that. But my point that I was highlighting with welfare is not to say that it's a type of regulation, but to say that the process of creating programs and involving the government and in trying to make sure that everything is up to the standard of the rule that was put in place, aka we're going to provide welfare checks to this amount of people, it creates a bureaucratic department that doesn't necessarily want to go away. And in order to justify their existence, they create new red tape, they create new rules, they have different standards. So it's not a slippery slope in that it will always end that way. Like I said, there are ways to prevent it. You make it first come, first serve. When it comes to EPA, when it comes to different carbon credits or things that the EPA may need, like maybe they say, okay, we'll allow 5,000 of these particular less expensive filters within the United States for the next 5 years. It's not, oh, we're going to take different considerations. We're going to say who is actually best suited to use this filter. No, the way to reduce all of it is to be a first come, first serve basis. And that's not how the government normally does things, because they want to try out different things. They don't want the big corporations to just be able to monopolize on every other person out there, every small business who is going about their duty and wouldn't necessarily have the time to apply right when that sort of regulation or right when those quote unquote filters go on the quote unquote market. So my point being here is that with regulation comes red tape. Okay, it's impossible. It is almost impossible to separate the two, because when you want to create an equitable system, when you want to create a system that benefits a particular segment of the population, is targeted at certain things, that discriminates against certain practices, all of these things are going to have their own rules, regulations, restrictions implemented within the passage, within the implementation of these different regulations. And when you do so, when you have restrictions, when you say this person can't necessarily have access to this, these corporations can't have access to this, we're going to pick and choose in order to balance the scales, you are going to have to bring on people to do analysis. You're going to have to bring on people to actually process things. You're going to have to bring on comms directors or people on the phone who are going to have to talk to the people who are disgruntled. You are continuing to build out a system rather than letting the free market operate as it should, letting a free market be uninfringed. Guess what? When you have a free market, no new people need to be hired in order to manage the market, except for the people that are receiving the benefits of the free market. Therefore, your Walmarts, your Targets, they can hire more people and that will benefit the market. When you start to manage a market, you have to continually buy more people because there are new aspects, there are new ideas, there are new things that are changing because your interference each time alters the parameters. Boom, boom, boom. And with that hiring, with that extra regulation, with those bureaucratic agencies, it's going to come down to red tape. Guess what? People are territorial. This is a weird example, but I want you to think about it. People are territorial about what they have in these bureaucracies. So maybe they create a special form. Maybe they create this new rule that certain things actually, you can't go through Jerry's. It can't go through Jerry's department. It has to come through my department. Because even though all those people there might be genuinely trying, they genuinely care about American people. They care about all people, maybe. And they want to create a process that is actually beneficial for everyone. That doesn't deny human nature. That doesn't deny there aren't going to be prideful people fighting over territory, fighting over funding. It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be, because guess what? Here's a great way to think about it. Washington works like this. I want you, that last example is a good point. Here is it in actuality when you go to Washington. Jimmy doesn't like that John from the next department down, maybe Jimmy is at welfare check 1 in this region, and doesn't like that John's in welfare check 2 and trying to steal more of his funding for his welfare checks. John's making an argument about his population is larger. His means-tested people are actually poorer, so he should get more money. And Jimmy's over here saying, no, I don't like that. Okay, so when we go to our senators, when we go to our congressmen, when we go to our department heads, we start lobbying. We say, hey, I need you to lock in some of this money here. I want this extra rule put in place. I want this new internal rule put in place so that John can't just keep feeding off of me. I know he has more people, but my department was here first. I have this amount of people that need this, so on and so forth. And then they write a new rule saying, well, you have to distribute the checks evenly between the two departments. You can't necessarily divvy it up based on population. And John's over there saying, whoa, that's not cool, man. Like I said, I have a larger population. More of my population that I'm seeing over here is actually poor because I oversee West Virginia, and Jimmy's over there overseeing Maryland. I mean, Maryland has a lot of poor people, but not as many poor people as West Virginia. The point being that these rules get built up over time. People lobby for protection of their status. And we are flawed creatures. The more we are involved in these systems, the more they revolve around us, our potential flaws as human beings, which there are always a lot of them, and nobody is perfect, and everybody has their flaws. The more people concentrate in one place, the more flaws. And the more flaws in the system, the more likely something is to go wrong, the more problems pop up, the more, in this case, a problem that you'll see is more red tape, or even in general, just more regulation. So I do not think that this is a solid argument from the New Republic. I understand their difference, and I empathize, honestly. They like the programs that they have. They love the programs that they have. They want Medicare and Medicaid to survive. They want Social Security to thrive and actually be able to support the people that are going to need to use it. Those are honorable, even if I don't agree with them, those are honorable objectives. And yet they can't realize that the red tape is going to come with the regulation. They're trying to parse it. They're trying to split it. They're trying to say that, no, they're not connected. And I promise you, they are. It is the nature of Washington. Hey, do a case study, New Republic, do a case study, or even find a way to get the government to recklessly spend on this because they love recklessly spending. And if you can implement regulations with I'll make it really generous. I'm gonna say with 50% less tape. I was going to say like 90% at first. No, like 50% less tape, red tape. And you can hold that for 5 years. If you can keep that going for 5 years, there are not new red tape / new rules, new applications, things like that are added over the course of that time. And then, hey, we'll actually genuinely consider that you've made an improvement in how the bureaucracy operates. But I'm telling you now, we've had bureaucracy for thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. Okay? And I was being a little bit hyperbolic there. It has been roughly 5,000-ish years. I mean, we have great examples of bureaucracies within France, Italy, going back even to the Persian Empire. The Chinese were absolutely famous with it. They actually they were some of the first ones to have like bureaucratic schools. So my point being, we've had bureaucracy for a long time, and yet we have never found a way to properly make it work. Obviously, we've continued as a civilization, we've continued as a people. So bureaucracy itself will not be the death knell of society or of humanity in general, but it may be the main collapse of a society. And I don't want to be a test case for bureaucracy ruining another country. So let's try to change our perspective here. Let's maybe move past it. You want to get rid of the red tape? Maybe you get rid of some of the regulations. Maybe you create a private fund. Maybe if you're so passionate about it, and so many other people are, you create a private healthcare fund. Guess what? There are private healthcare cooperatives right now. There are many networks that do it. And maybe that one that already exists doesn't like the fact that you can use it for abortions. Maybe they don't allow that. Guess what? You find a group of people who totally agree with your value set and say that you can actually use it for abortion healthcare. The other people will cover that. We'll do a cooperative payout for them. Then guess what? You have a beautiful system that's in place. The more people that you get involved, the more money you're able to have, the more you're able to cover each other's charges. Maybe you should try that. I understand there are lots more red tape there, but think of it like a healthcare union. Okay, it is just a healthcare cost union. Everybody is getting together and using their power as an individual and then building it with others in order to build their power collectively. But hey, I've spent enough time on that article, mainly because it's something I'm passionate about, and I feel like I said, I feel like their heart's in the right place. I just feel like they are misunderstanding what comes along with regulations and misunderstanding where the red tape comes from. The red tape isn't just put there to be annoying. The red tape is there to help facilitate the regulation, and very often goes very wrong. So with that said, let's jump to our second article from Alternet, and the headline reads, "Attorney details dirty tricks Trump could use to stay in power after 2028." I'll be really honest on this one. I think it's a little ludicrous. I think it's a little bit absurd. Now, why? Because there's one great point in here where they say, well, Donald Trump tried to use his power as president-in-chief, executive-in-chief, the president of the United States last time, in order to stay in power. And I understand they are right, okay? I'm not denying that. My question would be, what would his excuse be this time? What would his excuse be to stay president? Last time his excuse was, I won the election. And I think Donald Trump is able to convince himself of a lot of crazy things. A lot of his policies this time, I'm like, okay, yeah, you convince yourself of whatever you want. But in this case, I think he's able to convince himself that he actually won. And therefore, he was trying to verify what he believed to be a fraudulent. He was trying to verify that there was a fraudulent election and then verify the fact that he actually won through a less than ideal legal means. And then continued to go out there and talk to his supporters. And though he said, go and protest peacefully, his supporters took it out of context, but would they have been there without him? Not necessarily. So I understand nuance there. But my point being that, guess what? He is not going to run again in 2028. He cannot run again in 2028, at least for president. That's what the author goes on to say. No, actually, he could be VP. You know what? He could be VP, and then he could have his VP step aside, and then he would be president again. If he does that, I will eat my hat. I'll eat my shoes. I'll eat my clothes. Trust me, I will eat a lot because I will be right there with you, enraged at the fact that he would do something like that, a trick, a scam like that. I do not believe Donald Trump is that man. I think that people in general are fully capable of it. I do not think he is one of them, in my opinion. Now, could I be wrong? Of course. But the point I was getting at, besides the extra legal means, besides the little swap-a-roo that he would do with whatever VP he puts on whatever president he would put on the ticket and he would run as VP, the point I was getting at initially is this. He ran in 2020. He thought he won in 2020, and he used the power at his disposal in order to do things that were less than savory for some people's taste. There you go. Great. Understood. He does not have the means to do that this time. He cannot run again. Guess what? If he runs again, he will be absolutely lambasted. People will tell him he's not allowed to, and he'll say, well, there's a way around it, and the Republican Party will dispatch with him. I promise you that much. They will dispatch with him. Now, if he runs as VP on somebody else's presidential ticket, I think the Republicans would still have a big issue with that, but I don't know if they would dispatch with him. But if he outright said, no, I will be the president of the United States again, the Republicans will dispatch with him. 100,000,000%. Because guess what? While he has been great for the reforming of the party, while he has been terrible for their media hits, but in other ways he has been great for the new right revolution on the Republican side of the aisle, there's only so much that they can handle. And when the worst fears of the other side, which is that Donald Trump is an authoritarian dictator, are proven, and they will be overly righteous about it, if the Republicans do not come to heal, if they do not come to realize that Donald Trump is what the other side has been saying, they will be destroyed. Period, full stop. They will not survive the next 20 years. They will not exist as a party. Because don't get me wrong, a lot of Americans like Donald Trump. I don't think that the roughly 20% in the middle that voted for him, and let's be clear, it's a little bit more hazy than that, but roughly the 20% in the middle, I don't think that they love Donald Trump so much that they would be okay with that. No, they're the moderate people who like the fact that he had a good economy underneath his tenure as president. And they don't necessarily love all the other policies. They don't love him. They wouldn't die for him. But they are the people that would probably be afraid of something like that. They think of it as a possibility of him going out and actually taking more time away from the American people and becoming president for a little bit longer. They've thought about it, but it obviously didn't weigh enough on their soul because they might be like me and they may not think it will actually happen. They think that the media and the left are being hyperbolic. But when he eventually would, they would turn on him. And the 40%, I think the roughly 40% of Republicans, conservatives that support him, I'm going to be real, I think maybe 25%. I think maybe I'm saying like 40% of the population, roughly. It's a little bit more complicated than that. The breakdown probably is more like 33% of the actual population. But the point being, I would say about half of that is people riding the wave. They are willing to dispatch with Trump the second he is not useful. They are pragmatic people. The other half are his loyal supporters. They are strong. They are a very strong contingent, and they are able to bully their way into a lot of things. But him being president again, him saying that he will stay president, him running again, I do not think that they can bully their way in there. So this article absolutely, and let's be clear. Now, do I have statistical evidence? No. This is a gut check feeling. That's why I'm pulling this article up, because I just thought it was frustrating when I first saw it. But no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And maybe you could call me a denialist. Maybe you're going to sit there and say, Alex, hey, you don't understand how this works. Great. Throw it down in the comment section. I love to hear everybody's thoughts, and I can respond to more specific criticism each time rather than the one or two that this author put in there. And also, I feel more obligated to respond to you than I do to an author. I want to bring the article to you. I want you to go and be able to read it, and I want to hear your opinions as well. All right, with that said, let's jump into our final article, and it's a really quick one from NPR. Headline reads, "How will China impact the future of climate change? You might be surprised." And I'll be honest, when you hear about China in the United States, you hear a lot of back and forth, no me gusta. I don't want to say hatred because that's not necessarily fair, but not lots of love passed between the two. And a lot of the people on the right say, well, hey, China's not actually going green. They haven't actually committed to any goal in order to go green. And they're still running their coal power plants. And now this author's coming in and saying, well, actually, did you know that China only runs most of their new large coal power plants? Let's be clear, new and large. So two very vague terms. I don't know if new is from the last year or new is from the last 2 years, but they only run them about half the time. My question would be, what are the old ones doing? Are they still running? But also about what was it? About 33% of their new infrastructure, their new energy infrastructure has been green energy over the last few years. So the point being that is really impressive. In September alone, they were able to add somewhere around 20 gigawatts of energy capacity that was green versus roughly the United States throughout the course of the entire year of 2023 that was able to put up a roughly similar number. So my point being that it is definitely a contentious question as to whether or not they will actually go green. It is a contentious question whether the United States should prioritize other fuels rather than just green energy while they are continuing to expand their infrastructure. I think that China is going to say whatever they need to say in order to get ahead. I don't, and let's be clear, I would say about most nations, but I would definitely say this more particularly about China. They are a country that saves face. They are a country that builds random infrastructure projects, giant cities in the middle of nowhere that fall apart after a few years of not having anybody there checking up on it, not many people living there. I don't know if all of these green projects are of the highest quality and standards. I don't know if they will last more than 10 years. I don't know if they're actually sturdy and strong enough in order to prevail against the weather. So Just because they build something on the outside does not inherently mean that it actually works. Then again, you can say that about a lot of things here in America. A lot of the programs are just superficial. A lot of things that we do, that the government does, is, oh, hey, it's a little Band-Aid, and we'll address it later. And they never address it because we're just playing the game for show. But China has a track record of this specifically in infrastructure. So we'll see. We'll see. If you want to invest in green energy in China, go right ahead. You're not going to catch me doing it. This is not financial advice, but you're not going to catch me doing it, not anytime soon. And I don't think that they'll hold up their end of any deal because they haven't even technically committed to their emissions. The author's like, oh, I think that they'll commit to a 2035 here soon now that they're ramping up. But then why haven't they done it before? If they were going to ramp up like they did, because these infrastructure projects can't just be done in half a second, why didn't they commit to anything? Probably because they don't want to be held to anybody else's standards. So to pretend as though we can trust them to do it, I don't know about that one, Chief. All right, so we're going to go to our final article that comes from Animals Around the Globe. And the headline reads, see what happens with when a cat bites a baby's hand. And it is not what you expect. I'll be honest. I'll just describe it to you in case you don't want to go watch the video or you don't want to read the article in whole. But basically, the cat, he's chilling, looks like a little Siamese. He's biting at the boy's hand because the boy's trying to pet him. And he's like, nah, get away from me. And then the baby's like, oh, you want to play? Okay, you want to play? And he grabs his tail and he starts biting the cat's tail. And that's just legendary to me. That is the ultimate move of defiance as a baby. You don't know what this animal is. You have no idea what its capabilities are. You're just learning the world. And you're like, oh, you want to fight? Okay, you're biting me. I'm going to bite you back. I thought it was absolutely adorable. And I hope you can go watch the video or just read the description from this author as well. It's pretty good. And just have a little smile on your face as you go through the rest of your day. But with all that said, I'm going to tell you about where you can find all the articles. They're in the link in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at @YourDailyFlip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. And if you stick around here on Tuesday and Thursday, the show 6 and 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. It's international news. It's a little bit more brief than this one. You can find that here on Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon and also on the RSS feed. So with that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.